Welcome back to the Empower Students Now podcast. I'm Amanda Werner, and today we are talking about a book called NeuroTribes: The Legacy of Autism and the Future of Neurodiversity by Steve Silberman. This book was published in 2015, and it's an excellent book. It's really, really long. It's like 400 pages. So I'm doing a series talking about what the main highlights of what I learned and trying to answer the question, how did we get here? Why are there so many misconceptions and misunderstandings about autism? What happened? So in the first part of the series, which if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it. I talked about Hans Asperger. I talked about Leo Kanner, and how they both researched autism and had very different ideas of what autism was. And that Kanner's narrow definition of it as a rare, severe childhood condition won out. And that the deficit approach began in the world and in the US. And that this has caused a lot of damage to autistic families and communities and just public education in the way that we interpret autistic behavior and how to approach that. So that was episode 1. Episode 2, I want to go more into this theory of the refrigerator mother theory that Bruno Bettelheim perpetuated. And I'm going to talk about ABA, applied behavioral analysis, and how that began. And I'm going to talk about a parent who fought back against all of this. And also revisit the Rosa family, who they're a family. I think they're living in the Bay Area still today. And this story of this family is woven throughout the book, which I really love because they really represent so many of the challenges that families face when it comes to getting their kids the support that they need, including my family. I do want to tell you that I am autistic and ADHD, and I was diagnosed with both of those as an adult. And so for me, this is really, it's cathartic to talk about this and to research, why do people not understand autism still to this day? Why are there still so many myths that are perpetuated in the media? And when I say to someone I'm autistic and they look at me like I'm lying or like I am misinformed, when really they're the ones that are misinformed and don't understand what autism is. It's really, really frustrating. So being able to talk openly about this on my podcast, it's healing, but it's also really sad looking into the history of this and learning what happened and learning why we are where we are today. And I think that it's really important for teachers to understand the history of autism and to understand autism and the full range of what autism is. It's so important for teachers, not because I want you going around labeling people autistic, but just because I want you to understand that there are many, 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 many children out there that are not diagnosed, but are autistic. And just that understanding changes the way that you approach kids, the way that you interact with them. You don't have to go telling them like, I think you're autistic. That's not what I'm trying to say here, but I'm saying that the approaches, the humanizing, kind, curious approaches that Hans Asperger and the people like the nun that I mentioned in episode 1, the sister Victorine Zach, they're unsung heroes. They developed individualized strength-based approaches for understanding autistic children, for supporting them. And these were lost to history, and I want them back. I think this is a fight to get that approach back and to fight against this idea that autism is somehow devastating to families. Yes, it's challenging, but it's not devastating. It doesn't tear families apart. And it's not refrigerator mothers, cold mothers are not to blame. Like highly educated mothers who are very passionate and driven, they're not to blame. So that's, I'm giving sort of a very long introduction to this episode. And I do go on tangents, and that's just, you're going to have to bear with me when I do that, because it's how I work. Okay. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Empower Students Now podcast, a podcast about equity, neurodiversity, mindfulness, and student engagement. There's a lot that needs to change in our education system. The good news is teachers have the power to make these changes now. All right, so if episode 1 of this series was about what was lost in history and because of Nazi occupation of Germany and Austria, this episode is about what replaced it. So that history, those approaches, the humanizing approaches I was talking about in the introduction, that were introduced by Hans Asperger and his staff at his clinic working with autistic kids, that was lost to history. So what replaced it? Okay, so like that's what we're talking about today, which was Kanner's theory that it was very rare and that it was very extreme and like that it was a deficits model. But also this guy, Bruno Bettelheim, Silberman definitely paints him as a villain. He was a psychoanalyst at the University of Chicago. I mean, he was human, right? But like his ideas, they've impacted us today, which I think it's, we're in 2026 and I think this idea is still rampant. But he noticed that autistic kids had cold, emotionally withholding mothers. And he proposed this theory called the refrigerator mother theory. He ran a school called the Orthogenic School and presented himself as a savior of damaged children. But his methods were controlling and even abusive. He had enormous cultural influence during this time. I think the 1940s, 1950s. Let me just verify that real quick. And he was an Austrian-born psychologist. So but he worked in America. Yeah, so he was born in 1903 and died in 1990. And so the refrigerator mother theory, I think it was really popularized. It was popularized in the 1950s, but then it was debunked in the 60s. So, and 70s. So it was disproved, but it did damage, a lot of damage. And mothers, being told that the cause of their child's autism was insufficient love. I mean, you can imagine that would cause so much shame, so much guilt, and that they were told to institutionalize their children. So they not only were like blamed for what was, quote unquote, wrong with their child, they were also like torn apart from their child, right? Like their children were taken from them. So the idea that parenting causes autism did not come from science. It came from one man's ideology, and it really did stick for decades. And I feel like I felt this myself, a lot as a parent of an autistic child, people assuming that my kid, including teachers, especially teachers of my child, that somehow my kid is selfish and a brat and throwing tantrums because I give in too much or I spoil them. It's very similar, and it's disgusting. And it's dehumanizing, and it's simplifying something so much more complex than this simplified idea of like what's happening in a grocery store when a kid is having a meltdown. Not that all of those kids are autistic, they're having meltdowns in grocery stores, but you know what I mean. Any kid having a meltdown in a classroom, I think one of the first assumptions is it's the parent's fault. And so I think this refrigerator mother theory is the origin story, people. So can we just stop with that? Can we just stop? That's what I'm asking everyone right now. Please, please stop it. There's things are way more complex than that simplified idea of what's going on. Okay, so now what happened to all these autistic kids and their families during the 1950s and 60s? Well, they were institutionalized. And there's a place that Silberman talks about in the book NeuroTribes called Willowbrook, which was overcrowded and there was neglect and abuse. And many autistic people spent their entire lives in these institutions. And that was just what was done. And it did more damage than help. This is sad. It's really sad. And I'm sorry to have to like tell you all of this. It's a dark history of autism, but I really think it's important for us to understand, teachers especially, that this deficit model, this idea that somehow autistic kids and their families are broken and need to be institutionalized or need to be separated. It's not just like hurtful emotionally, it's like actually it damaged lives. And it was wrong. And thankfully, these institutions, I don't think, exist anymore. But one thing that I'm going to go on a tangent here for a second before I go into ABA, but one thing that I'm learning as my family is immigrating to Uruguay. Look at me, I'm doing better saying it. Homeschooling is frowned upon in many countries, and some countries it's illegal and parents could be arrested. Homeschooling is a really important a way for families to adapt their education for their autistic child. And so just homeschooling and having this negative view of it, it needs to change. And that's going on today. In many countries, homeschooling is illegal. And this is one thing that I love about California. It is very easy to homeschool and it is not frowned upon. I mean, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about homeschooling families, that they're weird or whatever, but weird is not necessarily bad, right? Okay. So I just wanted to mention that because, things are not great even today in 2026. So all of these terrible things that I'm talking about throughout history, like I feel like there's still terrible things going on today. Maybe not as bad, but maybe so. I don't know. How informed am I? Like I'm just one person doing research over here. I could be leaving something out or not aware of something that's happening today. I mean, I am aware of one thing just because of talking to other teachers in other states, that there are these classes in public schools called the autistic class. And all these kids are disabled in some way. Maybe all of them have autism. I don't know. But my guess is there's a lot more than just autism going on in these classes, but they're called the autistic classes. And these are the classes that are like smaller class size and the kids misbehave, not all of them, but, really extreme behaviors. And so other kids see these classes and they're, all put together in this, 10, 15 kid classroom. And they're labeled all of them are labeled just like the autistic class. I mean, what? It just seems wrong. And that's happening today. It is wrong. I think we could do better. I think we could do a lot better for these kids. I've left public education because I lost just a lot of sleep and emotional bandwidth. Like, it was hard. And it's hard to go to schools day in and day out trying to practice the approach of the strengths-based approach and the humanizing and the curiosity about different kids' experiences, those quote unquote like defiant kids. And I talk a lot about that on this podcast. So definitely check out those episodes about different approaches to that. But being the only one, and just being constantly bombarded with teachers' opinions of students and what's going on with them. And it just hurts. It's painful because these simplified assumptions of what's going on, that the kids, are just lazy or that the parents don't care. It just got too much for me. I couldn't handle it anymore. Okay, let's go to ABA. So there was a guy, Ivar Lovaas, and he developed applied behavioral analysis at UCLA. And this was very similar to classical conditioning theory, where learning is associated with a reward and that you have to extinguish negative behavior so that autistic kids could become normal or appear normal. So it was really trying to condition them to be normal. And his early methods included terrible, terrible punishments, electric shocks, shouting, physical force, all as part of the conditioning process. And underlying this philosophy was compliance. Extinguish autistic behaviors, and rather than trying to understand or be curious about them or accommodate them, we need to get rid of them. We did do ABA, for about 6 months. And I immediately noticed that this was the approach and I couldn't stand it. It felt like they were purposefully triggering my kid. And my kid is very, very, very smart. And so they were trying to get my kid to play a board game, and then they would get a reward. And I realized that ABA can be very beneficial to some families, such as the Rosas. They had an ABA teacher that came to their house. And we had ABA teachers come to our house, or practitioners. And I mean, how helpful to have another adult in your house helping you. There are definitely things about ABA today that I don't want to diminish. And there are, other adults supporting your family can be so, so helpful. But this compliance first mindset can be very, very harmful. And I just don't think it works. It's really all about extrinsic motivation. And from my experience, I am very, very motivated to a high degree when I'm doing something that I'm passionate about, that I'm interested in. And if someone is forcing me to do something I don't want to do, I am really, really hard-headed, I guess is the term you would call it. And I think a lot of autistic people can relate to this. I'm really going to dig my heels in and not do and rebel against unfairness. And I think that is I think these are autistic traits, personality traits. And so to have ABA come in and force compliance, I just don't see how this method was popularized and how it got to be what it is today, because it really is the only method that insurance providers pay for. I mean, it's like the only support system that exists for autistic kids or families with autistic kids, or families who are all autistic. I mean, what? When we demand kids make eye contact with us, when we demand that they sit still, when we demand that they stop fidgeting, we are operating from this idea that was created. When was ABA created? When did this happen? I'm going to look up the date for you right now. 1960s was when it was pioneered. And it's still the main intervention that's used today. And it's problematic. Okay. So I now want to talk about Bernard Rimland. And this guy was in the book, he's featured in NeuroTribes as one of the first major figures to push back against parent blaming. So he was a psychologist whose own son was autistic. And in 1964, he published a book called Infantile Autism, systematically dismantling the refrigerator mother theory and arguing that autism had a biological, neurological basis, not a parental one. So he is one of the people responsible for debunking this theory. He helped found the Autism Society of America and organized parents into a political force. But he is sort of a controversial figure in history because of his biomedical interventions, including the idea that certain diets and supplements could treat autism. And the Rosas, that family that lives in the Bay Area, they really got caught in this, spending lots and lots of money to figure out how to treat autism using diets and supplements. And I've got sucked into this too, as well. And there is this eating, I hate the word disorder, but there's this, I guess it is a disorder, but it's called ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. I would rather just call it avoidant restrictive food intake. But if you ever watched the Temple Grandin movie, what was that called? She Only Eats Jell-O. Claire Danes played Temple Grandin. I love that movie. If you've never seen it, you should see it. It is such a good movie. Is it just called Temple Grandin? It might just be called Temple Grandin. But she in the movie, she can only eat Jell-O. And I feel like that is sort of a sign of, I mean, I think she's expanded her eating, and I do think that partly it's because of sensitivities in the mouth to textures, not because, like there's something wrong. It's just a different brain. And yes, I think supplements can help, because if you're not getting enough nutrients, because you have ARFID, you need vitamins, you need supplements. But like these ideas about vaccinations causing autism, these have been debunked. And yet we still have, the Secretary of Health saying, that these are possible causes. And it's so infuriating. And that somehow like our diet is what caused it, or, and Silberman is very clear in this book. It is genetic, people. It's genetic. Okay. So this episode is a little longer than normal, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. We've spent 2 episodes looking at how autism was misunderstood, narrowed, weaponized against parents, and that the ideas about how to support autistic people, like ABA, won out over Hans Asperger and the nun that worked at his clinic, Sister Victoria and Zach. Their humanizing, open-ended, strengths-based approach was lost to history. And I'm trying to bring it back in this podcast. That's my goal. So next episode, we're going to zoom way out and look at the evidence that autistic people have always been here, that this is not an epidemic. And we're going to talk about the DSM-5, or like the different versions of the DSM and how it's evolved over time. And just talk about some of the extraordinary minds throughout history, and these people who are almost certainly on the spectrum, and that Steve Silberman theorizes were on the spectrum. It's pretty amazing. The next few episodes are going to be a lot better than these two. These two were dark and sad, and I'm sorry, but it's the truth, and we need to know the truth. But the next few episodes will be hopefully a little less heavy. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. And I can't wait to come back and talk more about this amazing book, NeuroTribes, The Legacy of Autism and the Future of Neurodiversity. Bye-bye.